Oh, okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On Those from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool new watch for you from the new brand, Ardor Forge. They were essentially founded back in 2017 and really set out with a purpose to build rugged field watches with original designs. And they even have the little tagline, Forged for Adventure, which I think is very fitting for the type of watch. Now, I'd say as far as the type of watch category this would fall into, it definitely is an outdoors sports watch. So some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a watch like this. Of course, you're going to want something that's tough, legible, and above all else, quite sporty in construction and fit and finish, which I think you're going to get here, but in a very non-traditional way. You can probably already tell just by looking at this watch that it not only uses very interesting materials, it actually uses very interesting finishing techniques as well. So really looking forward to taking a closer look at this one, and then make sure you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, now this is the Rothrock, and the particular blue dial model is known as the Seeger. Now, it was inspired by the Allen Seeger natural area in the Rothrock State Forest. So what you're gonna find, of course, is some interesting names to name all the different color combinations available, and they're all tied to the same area of inspiration. Now, as far as the specs go, this is a 42 millimeter watch with a 12 millimeter thickness and a 50 millimeter lug to lug. And then this is, of course, full stainless steel. And then it has that proprietary sand cast texture. So I believe that the actual texturing here is actually part of the cast. So these textures are put in and not just finished as such afterwards as an afterthought. So very interesting look. Definitely reminds me of kind of a smooth stone. You know, like the kind that you'd want to find to skip rocks. It definitely has that really nice feel to it. Very tactile. Definitely super outdoor oriented with just the way that it looks, the way that it feels, everything really about it. Now, as far as the crystal goes, it is a sapphire and it is flat. So you'll see here, there's nothing that's going to protrude from the case in terms of the crystal. Now, as far as the bezel goes, this is a fixed bezel, although it is scalloped very nicely. The crown is a screw-down crown, which is great, which helps with water resistance, but it actually has this very interesting little wood accent there. So really cool use of oak. So you're going to see oak accents here. You're going to see it on a rehaut, and then as well as on the rotor. So I think that's really a cool use of wood. I mean, obviously kind of the wood trends have been around for a while and more fashion oriented watches, and I think it's really nice to see a brand kind of take a material that's already been used, but use it in a new, interesting way that I think honestly is just a bit more stylish and a bit more palatable and a lot less polarizing. When compared to, of course, like a fully wooden watch with wooden links, wooden dial, and whatnot, or just different types of wooden accents that may be a little bit overpowering. I think here the wooden accents actually do suit the watch quite nicely. Now, as you saw before, this does have a very familiar movement in it. It's the Seiko Instruments NH35, and then it has that custom oak accented rotor there. This is actually the display case back on here is actually sapphire as well, so that's really nice when it comes to toughness, and also, of course, it shows that they're going the extra mile there as far as the quality of the build. Now, the prices for these, if I forgot to mention, are going to range anywhere from $350 to $550 depending on which options you put in there, and of course what types of discounts you end up qualifying for when you see this video and when you decide to pull the trigger, if you do. Now, the dial is quite nice. It's a really nice matte blue dial with printed indices, painted hands. It has super luminova, which we'll definitely get to here when we get to the Lume Shots. The water resistance, it does have a screw down crown, but it is only water resistant to 100 meters, which I think is fine, especially with a screw down crown. That's definitely a more solid 100 meters than you're going to get from a watch that is, that doesn't have a screw down crown that's going to list as 100 meters of water resistance. So this one I wouldn't feel too worried about to submerge fully underwater or not. As far as the lug width goes from here, the lug width is 22 millimeters, so it's a bit of a thicker strap here, non-tapering, beautiful kind of combination canvas strap with the leather underneath. This really interesting keeper here, sliding keeper. It actually is a bit odd when there's nothing inside of it. Once you actually have it on though, I think everything holds together quite well. You do also have the signed hardware in the same finish to match the case. And then you actually do have these really nice supported reinforced riveted holes here. The only problem with this is because of the way the style is, the holes are much larger and they're actually separated by more space. So when it comes to kind of dialing in that very perfect fit, you might find it being a little loose or a little bit tight depending, or you might find it just dials in perfectly for you depending on your wrist size. So this thing is pretty cool, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. I really enjoy that, you can see the wood accents. Let's say, you can see them two at a time, then you tilt it, and then so there's still a tie-in. It's nice because of that crown. You can see the crown, you can see the rotor together, or you can see the crown, you can see the rehaut together. So I think that's really interesting. As far as the case shape itself, it's really quite nice. It's tough to make these types of cases really look very interesting when you have a uniform finish on here. So there's not going to be any contrast between high polished or brushed or anything like that. It's pretty much consistently the same textured matte finish all the way around the watch. But the nice thing is that it really catches the light. As you can see here, the highlights are going to be much brighter, and then where the scallop is much deeper low light. So it does add a nice amount of dimension there. So it's still, although it's a matte finish, it's not a super flat finish, which I can definitely appreciate. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get this piece. All right, as you can see, this 42 millimeter case, and with decently long lug to lug proportions, is going to wear full sized on my 7 1/4 inch wrist. You get up close, it's going to look even bigger, but that is more so just kind of the lens distortion, making it look a bit larger and more oversized than it actually is. If you get a little bit more perspective on it, I think a little bit away from the lens, you can see that it actually fits quite well. Obviously, again, this is not something that's going to wear smaller by any means. It definitely wears the full 42, if not wearing, feeling a little bit larger, maybe because that 4 o'clock crown and the larger crown guards that stick out give it a little bit more heft. Also, you have a non-tapering canvas strap there, which doesn't necessarily lend to slimming the watch down by any means. But here's what I mentioned about the keeper. It's actually really nice while in use. It works really perfectly. I think it's just in those cases when you're actually trying to slide it underneath, or it's not in use where it can be a little bit flimsy. I think for the space, obviously it has to be quite open because this is a very thick strap. So it's gonna just kind of lay funny when there's not anything being run through it. But once it's there secured, I mean, that it really holds it, and it definitely gives it a very interesting and dynamic look to it. It's just something about it. It looks kind of like it was fixed, almost kind of just an emergency or something like that. So I think that's a really cool look and a nice little detail that kind of gives it that sporty outdoor vibe. And then on the wrist, I think, of course, as you can see, this isn't something I'm going to try to slide underneath a dress shirt cuff or anything like that. But it does look really nice on the wrist, I think. And, for what it's worth and for what the intended use case, I think this thing could definitely be a lot of fun out on a camping trip or down by the lake. So let's go ahead and move into some Lume shots and low light transition. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, the Lume is actually quite strong. It does glow in a bright green tone. You can see there's a bit of an orange tint there to the hands. And it's nice to see the seconds hand actually fully lume there as it marches along. Now, One of the things I like to do in these Lume Shots is actually work in some low light transition, just because at the end of the day, my hot studio lights do a really good job of more so representing what this is going to look like in direct sunlight. But you know what? You're not always going to be wearing your watch out in the middle of a park in really, really strong lighting conditions. Sometimes you're going to have, you know, for the most part, you're probably going to have much dimmer lighting conditions. You're going to be going transitional, coming in and out of buildings, getting in and out of your vehicle and whatnot. So it's nice to know how some of these colors really do render in lower light situations. And it's also nice to see that balance of legibility as you are transitioning in and out of a high contrast area. Obviously, in pure darkness, it's going to be a lot easier to read versus something that's going to be here is going to be at the other end of the spectrum. That's somewhere in between, I think, is where you really kind of get an eye to see if the color play works out to where it's going to keep the watch very, very legible still, even in that kind of dusky time frame. Now, another thing that the low light actually does reveal are imperfections in the finish. Now, this particular type of finish, obviously, it's not like it's brushed, so we can't really look for uniformity in the brushing. But one thing you can look for is just the way that the light is going to play off of that matte finish, where you're going to be getting highlights and lowlights and whatnot. You're going to be getting a little bit more dimension. It does give you a nice idea from that perspective. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get into some closing thoughts while the camera readjusts to the lighting. On the wrist, it definitely feels like a purpose-built sports watch, and it does exude that outdoor theme. As far as model variants go, there's actually 4 total variations, including the blue. As far as comparable models go, though, it's really tough to compare this to anything. Yes, there are a lot of outdoor adventure style watches, but I think they're definitely a lot more traditional and derivative in comparison. This is definitely a very original take, doing some very interesting things that we just haven't really seen from a micro brand. So really the bottom line is, I'd say probably one of my biggest takeaways from spending time with this piece is that it really does kind of have the best use of wooden accents that I've seen on a wristwatch thus far. I think it's nice that it's not truly overpowering, but it does serve a purpose. It's not just for fashion. There's a functionality and just, and I guess not necessarily a functionality, but just a relevancy in the theme that makes the wood really make a lot more sense, right? In the past, we've seen a lot of kind of wooden watches, and they're just meant to be kind of worn around the office. I think this one is a little bit more interesting in that it's meant to be outdoors, you know, out in the shade of a tree. So I think it's a nice tie-in, and it does help the watch read very easily as an outdoor adventures type watch, versus you kind of having to do a guess and wondering what type of style that it's straddling. So with all that said, definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. If you're not, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.